What if I told you that the man who built a billion-dollar empire started with nothing but a prison jumpsuit and a promise to his dying mother? What if I told you that the very system designed to break him became the foundation of his greatest triumph? And what if I told you that everything you think you know about success, about second chances, and about the American dream is about to be shattered by a story so extraordinary, so impossible, that it will leave you questioning every excuse you've ever made for not pursuing your own dreams? This is not a fairy tale. This is not Hollywood fiction. This is the raw, unfiltered truth about a man whose name you probably don't know, but whose story will haunt you long after you finish reading these words. Because this story forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. If someone can rise from the absolute depths of human despair to the pinnacle of business success, what's really holding the rest of us back? Once upon a time, in the grimy corridors of Riverside State Penitentiary, a 23-year-old man named Marcus Williams sat in solitary confinement, staring at four concrete walls that seemed to mock every dream he'd ever dared to dream. The year was 1987, and Marcus was serving a 7-year sentence for armed robbery, a desperate act born from watching his younger sister go hungry while their mother worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. But this story isn't about the crime. It's about what happened next. On a Tuesday morning in March, a guard approached Marcus's cell with news that would change everything. His mother had collapsed at her factory job and was in the hospital, asking for him. The prison system, in a rare moment of compassion, allowed Marcus a supervised visit. What he found in that sterile hospital room was a woman who had aged 20 years in the 5 months since his incarceration. Her hands, once strong enough to lift him as a child, now trembled as she reached for his face through the handcuffs. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the beeping machines. "I need you to promise me something. When you get out of that place, don't let them convince you that this is all you'll ever be. You're going to build something so big, so beautiful, that people will forget where you came from. But you'll never forget, because that's what will make you different from all the rest." 3 days later, she was gone. What Marcus did next defied every statistic, every prediction, every reasonable expectation about recidivism and the fate of young black men in the American criminal justice system. Instead of sinking deeper into despair, he made a decision that would seem laughable to anyone who knew his circumstances. He was going to become a businessman. But here's where this story takes a turn that nobody saw coming, not even Marcus himself. The prison library became his Harvard Business School. While other inmates spent their days in the yard or watching television, Marcus devoured every business book, every financial magazine, every economic textbook he could get his hands on. He read about companies like IBM, General Electric, and emerging tech startups in Silicon Valley. He studied the biographies of entrepreneurs, the strategies of successful CEOs, and the mathematical principles underlying financial markets. But reading wasn't enough. Marcus needed practice, so he did something unprecedented. He started a business inside the prison. Using the 47 cents an hour he earned in the prison laundry, Marcus began buying candy bars from the commissary and reselling them to inmates at strategic times. After visits when emotions ran high, during long lockdowns when comfort food became currency, and late at night when sugar cravings hit hardest. It sounds trivial, but within 6 months, Marcus was earning more than the guards. The warden noticed. Instead of shutting down the operation, he called Marcus into his office and asked a question that changed everything. "Son, what else can you do?" What followed was the most unconventional business incubation program in American history. Marcus convinced the warden to let him organize the prison's first ever entrepreneurship workshop. He taught fellow inmates basic financial literacy, showed them how to create business plans, and helped them understand concepts like profit margins, market analysis, and customer service. The program was so successful that the state prison system adopted it across 17 facilities. But Marcus wasn't done. He identified a problem that had plagued the prison system for decades: the astronomical recidivism rate. 83% of released prisoners were rearrested within 5 years, creating a revolving door that cost taxpayers billions and destroyed countless families. Marcus saw an opportunity where others saw only an intractable problem. He drafted a proposal that was either genius or insanity, depending on your perspective. Marcus suggested creating a transitional program that would train inmates in practical business skills during their final year of incarceration, then provide them with seed funding and mentorship upon release. The program would be funded through partnerships with local businesses who would benefit from a trained, motivated, and grateful workforce. Prison administrators laughed at the proposal. State officials dismissed it as naive idealism. But Marcus had learned something crucial during his time behind bars. Persistence beats intelligence. Preparation beats talent. And belief beats circumstance every single time. When Marcus was released in 1994, he had $247 in his pocket. A business plan that had been rejected by 17 government agencies and a promise to keep to his deceased mother. He also had something that money can't buy, an unshakable understanding of human resilience and the power of second chances. The first company that hired Marcus was a small janitorial service run by a man named Robert Chen, himself an immigrant who understood what it meant to be dismissed by society. Marcus wasn't hired as an executive or consultant. He was hired to clean office buildings at night. But Marcus saw every building he cleaned as a potential client, every business owner he met as a possible partner, and every rejection as valuable market research. Within 18 months, Marcus had convinced Mr. Chen to let him start a subsidiary division focused on helping recently released prisoners find employment. The program started with 3 men. Within 2 years, it had placed over 200 former inmates in stable jobs, and the recidivism rate among program participants dropped to 12%. Local news stations picked up the story. Business journals wrote about the innovative approach to criminal justice reform, and suddenly Marcus Williams was fielding phone calls from companies across the country who wanted to implement similar programs. That's when Marcus made the decision that transformed him from an employee into an entrepreneur. He left the janitorial company and founded Second Chance Solutions, a consulting firm that helped businesses develop programs for hiring and training formerly incarcerated individuals. His unique value proposition was simple. He was the only consultant in America who had lived the experience his clients were trying to address. The business grew slowly at first. Marcus operated out of a one-room apartment, using a card table as his desk and a borrowed laptop as his only technology. But his client results were undeniable. Companies that implemented his programs reported higher employee loyalty, lower turnover rates, and significant cost savings compared to traditional hiring methods. More importantly, they were changing lives on a scale that felt miraculous. By 2003, Second Chance Solutions had grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise with offices in 12 states. Marcus had personally helped over 3,000 formerly incarcerated individuals find meaningful employment, and his programs were being studied by criminal justice researchers at major universities. He was invited to speak at business conferences, consulted with government agencies, and featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with helping thousands. He wanted to help millions. In 2005, he made another audacious decision. He sold Second Chance Solutions for $47 million and used the proceeds to launch something much bigger. The Phoenix Foundation, a venture capital firm that exclusively funded businesses started by formerly incarcerated entrepreneurs. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of simply finding jobs for ex-offenders, Marcus was providing them with the capital and mentorship to create jobs for others. The first Phoenix Foundation investment was a landscaping company started by a former gang member from Detroit. The company now employs over 400 people and generates $32 million in annual revenue. The second investment was a food truck business started by a woman who had served time for drug possession. That business evolved into a restaurant chain with 67 locations across the Southeast. Today, the Phoenix Foundation portfolio includes over 200 companies that collectively employ more than 50,000 people and generate over $3 billion in annual revenue. Marcus Williams, the man who once sat in solitary confinement with nothing but a promise to his mother, now oversees one of the most successful impact investment firms in American history. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. Marcus never forgot where he came from, and he never let success change his core mission. Every Phoenix Foundation portfolio company is required to hire at least 30% of its workforce from populations that face employment barriers: formerly incarcerated individuals, recovering addicts, homeless veterans, and other groups that society often writes off as unemployable. The ripple effects have been staggering. Independent studies estimate that Phoenix Foundation companies have kept over 12,000 people from returning to prison, saved taxpayers approximately $200 million in incarceration costs, and transformed entire communities by providing economic opportunities where none existed before. Marcus Williams is now 61 years old. He's worth an estimated $430 million, owns homes in 7 states, and has been invited to advise presidents, governors, and Fortune 500 CEOs on criminal justice reform and social entrepreneurship. But every morning he still wakes up thinking about that promise he made to his dying mother in a hospital room 38 years ago. The story of Marcus Williams forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about potential, possibility, and the excuses we make for our own limitations. If a man can transform a prison sentence into a business empire, if he can turn society's rejection into a platform for changing thousands of lives, if he can build billion-dollar impact from a 47-cent-an-hour prison job, then what's really stopping any of us from pursuing our biggest, most audacious dreams? This isn't a story about crime and punishment. It's not a story about redemption or second chances. This is a story about the raw, unlimited power of human determination when it's channeled towards serving something bigger than ourselves. This is a story about what becomes possible when we stop making excuses and start making promises to our families, to our communities, and to the future version of ourselves that's waiting to be born. The question isn't whether you have what it takes to succeed. Marcus Williams proves that circumstances don't determine destiny. Decisions do. The question is, what promise are you willing to make, and what are you willing to sacrifice to keep it? Your story is waiting to be written. The only question is, will you have the courage to pick up the pen? What extraordinary story of transformation do you have locked away inside you? What promise are you ready to make to yourself today? Share your thoughts below. Your journey might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to take their first step toward their own impossible dream.